Okay, good morning, everyone here in the room. Good morning, people watching YouTube. Okay, so here we have Unit 7. We've been looking at Chapter 23, which is about World War II. 24, which is the Cold War. And 25 is the catch-all 1950s changes. In SP 30 this week, we spent Tuesday on World War II. Wednesday, we went over the Cold War. So we started talking about the 1950s. I figured I could talk a little bit more about the 1950s here, and then whatever anyone has any questions, we could cover that. Good? Okay. So some of the biggest changes in the 1950s have to do with veterans after the war. The biggest law that is going to affect these veterans is the GI Bill. The government is very thankful to the veterans for fighting in the war, and they're going to try to make life as easy as possible for them. And so they're going to do that through two ways: education and home buying. So they're going to make tuition to colleges very cheap. They're going to make buying a home very easy, where veterans have to pay as little as $1 of the down payment. And so because of that, that means all these people are going to start getting married, and that leads to the baby boom. All the veterans are coming back and they're ready to start their family. So excited that the war is done and they survived. They're ready to have a family, and they have lots of babies to prove it. And with all these babies, they need a place to live. And many of these people begin moving to the suburbs. Now, big cities during this time had many factories from the wartime making war supplies. However, many of these factories had many of these companies had multiple factories in different cities. And during the war, when production went way up, they had to build new factories. And they almost never built the new factories in northern Midwestern cities like New York or Milwaukee or Cleveland. They almost built them all in places like California, Arizona, Texas, all these southern cities, especially southwestern cities in the Sun Belt. And so if you were living in the northern and Midwest big cities, a lot of those factories and industries closed down in the big cities. And so if you were working in those places during the war, or if you came back after the war ended, there's not as many jobs in the big cities. And so that made it easier for people to move to the suburbs because there's more jobs out there. There's a lot of service type jobs out there. So many veterans who are coming back want to move into these suburbs that they have to create new ways of building the homes. Does anyone remember the guy who made new types of homes or new process? Yeah, Levitt. Okay. Levitt made these what are called Levitt towns. Okay, these neighborhood suburbs with hundreds and hundreds of homes that he was able to build very quickly in an assembly line like process. And so we have all these homes being built, and all the veterans are moving there for their first time home buying, and they're able to do that because of the GI Bill. Now, we also talked about the problems that come with the suburbs, though, especially some like Levitt would have covenants that would not allow people of color to buy homes in neighborhoods. So they were racially exclusive. Okay. They would exclude certain races from neighborhoods. We've seen realtors not showing homes for certain people in certain neighborhoods. Even the GI Bill, in some cases, would not give those really good down payment deals to African American veterans. And so that led to pretty segregated neighborhoods Again, none of this is like a law that's set up that's keeping people out, but it's these policies done mostly through private organizations, through Levitt, through realtors that are creating these separations. And so that's kind of a difference we see in northern states and southern states. Southern states, the segregation happens because of laws made by states and local congresses or legislatures. In the north, it's more Levitt and his company, realtors company, bankings, or bank companies that is leading to segregation. And so this pattern of white Americans moving from big cities to the suburbs is called white flight, where white home buyers are able to take advantage of these systems that are in place, like the really good deals on home buying, like the new suburbs that are being built in Levittowns, whereas people of color are being excluded from these opportunities. So we see a heavy move from big cities to the suburbs for white Americans, and for people of color being excluded from these suburbs, leading to less housing opportunities in these big cities. A lot of the homes that were built previous to the war are actually going to be taken down because of highway systems. Interstate highway systems are going to be created to connect big city to big city. And oftentimes they would build the highway into the big city through what they consider to be the path of least resistance, going through neighborhoods of people who had little or less political power. And so oftentimes they would go through neighborhoods of people of color, knowing that they had taken away those political powers from them before. So it'd be easier to build a highway through their neighborhood, and through eminent domain, taking those neighborhoods. It led to less housing opportunities, less availability of housing, which meant that there were fewer places to live their housing, and more people had to move into apartment buildings, and eventually in the 1950s in public housing under the Fair Deal. Okay, that was a lot. Any questions on any of that? Okay, highway system. So it connects big city to big city. It also can help for emergencies. Like if there's a hurricane coming, the highway system is able to move a lot of people very quickly. If we have the communists invade, we'll be able to move our people from one place to another, and the army can use it, right? The tanks can go down I-94 and they can get to where they need to much faster. The highway system also enables people who live in the suburbs to still work in the big cities. There were some businesses still in these big cities. Many of them are turning to a service economy. Okay. Service economy means that your business doesn't make anything. It's not like a factory. They provide some service for people, like an accounting firm or a law firm, right? They don't produce anything, but it's a service for Americans. And people who especially work in service economy, but in offices in general, are called white collar workers. White collar workers are typically working in offices. Typically, it requires more education. It is also higher paid. We can see through the Education GI Bill, now veterans are able to go to school and get these this education that's needed for the white collar work. They get you higher paying jobs. It's less physical labor, more mental labor that is going to transform the 1950s. And so workers are going to, in many cases, live in the suburbs and use the highways to get to their office job. See how these all connect? And so with these offices, businesses are realizing that they can consolidate consolidation of corporations. What is that? Basically, what that means is we go from more small businesses before the war to fewer big corporations. A lot of these big companies, even big companies before the war, got all the war contracts to, like, Ford and General Motors. They get all these contracts to build the airplanes and the tanks during the war, and they get a whole bunch of money through that. And with all that extra money they're earning, they build new factories. Many of them are places like California, Arizona, and Texas. And the small businesses that made cars before the war start to disappear because they're being eaten up by the big few corporations. That does lead to some lessening of competition. Lead to problems later on. Now, in these businesses, we do see a change for women as well. And we see a change that really depends on your economic status, like how much money you have, how much money you make in your family. So what I mean by that, many middle-class women who worked in war factories during World War II, many left those positions after the war. They were working high-skilled jobs. In World War II, but then when all the veterans came back, they left those jobs. The veterans retook those high-skilled, high-paying jobs in the factories, and many of these women went to work at the home. In the middle class, they're getting married to veterans who have gotten their education, work in the offices, got higher paying jobs. And so that makes it easier for the family to make this choice for women to work at the home. But for some women, some working class women, they might not have that opportunity. Maybe they have less education or less history in high skilled jobs. Okay, maybe they didn't work as a riveter or a welder or some other job like that in World War II. Maybe they were working in a lower skilled job that paid you less. And so after the war, what we see happen is many of these women will continue to work outside the home. In fact, that percentage will increase after the war. So with all these women in middle class who are leaving the job, there's even a higher percentage of women who are joining the workforce after the war. I think it was like in 1945, about 32%, 31% of people working outside the home were women. By the end of the decade, it's something like 36%. So it's a slow increase, but a lot of that comes from working class women who are in many cases married to men who also don't have history in the high skilled, high paying jobs. And because of that, it makes it more difficult to work at home and needing the double wages. That make sense? Now, for middle class women, this idea of working at the home, um, in many cases, there is this societal pressure or expectation for women to work outside the home or work in the home, take care of the kids, to cook, clean. We see it in advertisements, TV. Okay. Whenever we see women in these popular media, they're almost always portrayed as a happy housewife. And we need to, come to a conclusion or agreement that working at home or working outside the home, neither it is bad or good or better than the other. I think the problematic part of it comes when there's an expectation that women have to live in a certain way and that choice is not available to them. That's when it gets into trouble, to a troublesome territory, I think. Does that make sense? Um, Any questions from chapter 25 that I didn't go over or confused by in the notes? Or... This is like all 25. Yeah. Okay. Great. We have about 10 minutes. Is there anything else from chapter 23 or 24 you want me to go over? The important stuff? Like what? I don't. We don't have time to go over everything, but can you give me narrow it down a little bit more? Well, okay. Yep. That's good. Okay, mobilization. So mobilization, remember, is getting ready for war. Even before the war started, the question of should we get ready for war is asked, right? Some people are isolationists and say we shouldn't get ready for war. What's an example of a person or group who were isolationists? Yeah. Who is it? Okay. What is it? America First Committee. Yep. America First Committee, AFC, Lindbergh, George Nye, Henry Cabot Lodge. Those were on the BBQs from yesterday. Okay. All isolationists saying that we should not get involved, we should not spend more money. Okay. But we have interventionists, people who say let's get more involved. Like FDR. Now, FDR knows that generally the public is more isolationist at this time. So as the Germans are doing their thing, Roosevelt is kind of like hinting that, okay, we might need to get involved soon, right? He gives his For Freedom speech, right? Which says, okay, we basically need to make sure that the world is safe for everybody, or we don't have these fears of freedom from fear, freedom from want, and so that leads to the Lend-Lease, okay, where we can lend more weapons to our friends and allies, making America the arsenal of democracy. And so as the arsenal of democracy is gearing up and making more stuff for the war, This is changing our mobilization, right? We're getting closer to war and getting ready for it. Fast forward a few months, we have Pearl Harbor, and now we're ready for war, right? So we need to change everything about our society so we can win this war. We're already making stuff for the war effort, and we need to make even more. And so we have the War Production Board that's going to like direct natural resources to the factories. They're the ones who are going to choose which companies get the contracts to make like the tanks and the planes, right? They help those big companies get bigger wartime contracts. They're going to make a whole bunch of stuff. So we need to make stuff. We need to get men. So they create the Selective Service Draft. Okay, bring more men in. Many women are going to join in the military, not in combat roles, but in support units. Unfortunately, with selective service, with the Army being built, we still see military segregation. Where African American soldiers are segregated, separated from fellow white soldiers. And we need to figure out how we're going to pay for all the soldiers, how we're going to pay for all the stuff we're producing. And so they're going to raise taxes. They're going to ask people to buy war bonds, which is essentially the government borrowing money from the people, right? You pay for a bond, and the government will pay you back later with interest. So we're getting money now. Now we have money. We have to make sure that all of our spending doesn't lead to increased inflation or too much inflation. So how can we stop inflation? Rationing. Stop inflation, one, through rationing, where we are making our people buy less stuff. One, so more resources can go to the war effort. It also stops inflation from getting too high. We can also salvage. So we're salvaging and recycling all of our products. Like, we gotta wear. We can be grateful, right? Even though he's a dweeb, we can still be grateful. He is a dweeb. So we need to recycle all of our metal, our rubber, bacon fat, right? Because we can use that for the war effort. So not only do we not have to buy that stuff now, but we can use it for the war, right? We can ask people to grow victory gardens, so that instead of buying food at the grocery store, which contributes to inflation, you're growing your own food, which doesn't contribute to inflation. And it's more food is available to be sent to our soldiers. So one misunderstanding I think I see sometimes from students is they think that like rationing meant like I'm not going to eat my whole plate of food and I'm going to like put it in a box and send it to a soldier. That's not what's happening. Okay, so you ration it so people are buying less, so more food gets sent right to the soldiers. You salvage supplies, you salvage resources, so the government doesn't have to pay for all those resources. And victory gardens, you're growing your own food, so the government can take all the food that's being grown by the farmers and send it to the soldiers and their allies. That's the other mobilization. I know I'm missing. Yeah, those are some of the big. Oh, Office of War Information. We've seen this already, right, with the propaganda built during World War I. You have like posters. But also in now the 1940s, they're able to use movies to make propaganda. Lots of movies during this time are made. They always show like the American soldiers, the good guys going in fighting the bad guys, right? Or even I think we saw this in one of the videos we watched in class. Before a movie was done, they didn't really have trailers like they do today in a movie theater. Instead, they have like a comedian or like cartoons at the beginning. And I think we saw in one of the videos, there was like a Disney cartoon. Do you remember this? Did I show this to you? So even like Disney cartoons, they were talking about the war. So everything is focused on the war during these 4 years. That's what we mobilize and enable us to win. Okay. Any other questions before we're done for today? Yes. Yeah. This is like ice. This is like foreign policy, but pretty much everything else is home changes. It's all fair game. Okay. Okay, that's it. If you have any questions for me,